The fog clung to Astoria like a second skin that October evening in 2025, wrapping the coastal town in a gray shroud that blurred the edges of everything. I stood outside the Liberty Theater, Astoria's pride and joy, its marquee glowing faintly through the mist. The Carver Family Foundation's annual fundraiser was in full swing inside, a glittering affair of champagne flutes, tailored suits, and the kind of small talk that cost $500 a plate to overhear. I adjusted the hem of my navy dress, the damp air making it stick to my legs, and checked my reflection in a darkened shop window. My dark hair was pulled back in a low bun, my face pale but determined. I was here to present my research on coral reef restoration, a project I'd poured 3 years of my life into. My mother, Evelyn, had called me a week ago, her voice unusually warm. "Lena, this is your moment," she'd said. "Show them what a carver can do." I should have heard the warning in her tone. Inside, the theater's banquet hall was a sea of candlelight and crystal. Chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, casting soft light on the faces of Astoria's elite politicians, philanthropists, and a few tech moguls who'd bought vacation homes on the coast. My sister, Mira, stood near the stage, her crimson gown catching the light like a warning signal. Her smile was sharp, practiced, the kind that made you feel like you were being measured and found wanting. Declan, my cousin who'd been raised like a brother, leaned against a pillar, his tie loose, his smirk lazy but deliberate, like he was waiting for a show to start. My father, Thomas, sat at the head table, his glasses reflecting the candlelight, his expression unreadable. My mother was beside him, her hands folded tightly, her pearls gleaming against her black dress. I weaved through the crowd, nodding at familiar faces, my notes tucked under my arm. The weight of the evening pressed against my chest, but I was used to it. I'd always been the quiet carver, the one who worked late in the lab while Mira dazzled at galas and Declan charmed his way into partnerships. My parents had never said it outright, but I knew they saw me as the odd one, the daughter who'd rather study algae than pose for family photos. Still, I'd thought tonight was different. My mother's call, my father's rare nod of approval when I'd shown him my slides, they'd made me believe I was finally being seen. The MC, a local news anchor with a too bright smile, took the stage. Next up, Lena Carver, lead researcher for the Carver Coral Initiative. With a groundbreaking vision for our oceans, I stepped into the spotlight, the heat of it prickling my skin. The crowd quieted, their faces a mix of curiosity and polite boredom. I cleared my throat, my voice steady. "Good evening. Tonight, I want to share a plan to save our coral reefs, starting with a new symbiotic algae strain that—" "Lena, stop!" Mira's voice sliced through the room, sharp and cold as a blade, heads turned, murmurs rippling like waves. She climbed the stage steps, her heels clicking with deliberate precision, her gown trailing behind her like blood in water. "We need to address something first." I froze, my notes crumpling in my hand. "Mira, what are you doing?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of the crowd. She turned to the audience, her expression a perfect blend of sorrow and resolve. "It breaks my heart to say this," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "But Lena has been stealing from the foundation, from all of you." The air left my lungs. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that felt like a punch. My knees buckled, but I gripped the podium, my nails digging into the wood. "That's not true," I said, my voice trembling now. "I've never touched." And worse, Declan's voice boomed from the back, cutting me off. He stepped forward, holding up a printed bank statement, waving it like a flag of victory. She's been spreading lies about me to sabotage my engagement. Here's the proof: withdrawals from the foundation's account. Traced to her. I stared at the paper, my vision blurring. The highlighted lines, the circled numbers, they meant nothing to me. I'd never seen them before. I looked at my parents, desperate for a lifeline. My mother's eyes were fixed on her lap, her lips pressed into a thin line. My father stood, his voice low but final. "Lena, we've seen enough. You're done here. Leave." The word leave hit like a stone. "You're not even asking me," I said, my voice breaking. "You're just going to believe them." No one answered. Mira's eyes gleamed with something like triumph, her lips curving just enough to betray her act. Declan folded his arms, daring me to fight back. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, their pity sharper than their judgment. I saw Mrs. Hargrove, my high school biology teacher, shake her head. Mr. Ellison, who'd funded my first research grant, turned away. I stepped back from the podium, my notes falling to the floor. The spotlight followed me, merciless. As I walked down the aisle, my heels echoed in the silence, each step a reminder of what I was losing. I passed my parents' table, waiting for my mother to look up, for my father to call me back. They didn't. Mira's voice followed me, addressing the crowd now, spinning a story of betrayal and redemption that wasn't mine. Outside, the fog swallowed me whole. The theater's doors closed behind me, muffling the applause for Mira's speech. I stumbled to my car, parked 2 blocks away, my breath hitching. The drizzle had turned to rain, soaking my dress, my hair, my skin. I made it to the driver's seat before the first sob broke free, raw and ragged, tearing through me like a storm. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, my reflection in the rearview mirror, a stranger's eyes wide, face pale, a woman unmade. My phone buzzed in my purse. I fumbled for it, hoping for a message from my mother, an apology, anything. It was a text from her. "Don't come home. We've packed your things. They're at the marina." The marina, of course, the place where we used to sail as kids, where I'd learned to tie knots and read tides. Now it was a graveyard for my belonging. I drove through the rain, the windshield wipers slapping rhythmically, the sound a cruel metronome. The marina was deserted, the boats bobbing in the dark. My duffel bag sat under a flickering streetlight, soaked through, a black lump against the concrete. I knelt beside it, the rain mixing with my tears, and unzipped it. Clothes, my laptop, a few books, everything I owned, reduced to a single bag. At the bottom, I found a single photograph, torn in half. It was me, age 10, with my grandmother, Marion, on Cannon Beach, our toes in the sand. Someone, Mira, Declan, my mother, had ripped it, leaving just her face, her kind eyes staring up at me. I clutched the photo to my chest, the edges cutting into my palm. I didn't cry again. I couldn't. Something shifted inside me, a tide pulling back, gathering strength. I stood, the rain pouring down, and whispered to the empty night, "They don't get to decide who I am." I drove aimlessly, the fog lights barely cutting through the mist. Astoria's streets were quiet, the shops shuttered, the town asleep. I ended up at the Seaside Motel, a rundown place off Highway 101, its neon vacancy sign buzzing faintly. The clerk didn't look up as I paid for a room in cash. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and regret, but it was a roof, a bed, a lock on the door. I dropped my bag and sat on the mattress, the springs creaking under my weight. The torn photo lay beside me, Grandma Marion's face a silent witness. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat, staring at the wall, waiting for the world to make sense again. The seaside motel was a relic of Astoria's tourist boom, its faded sign promising ocean views that didn't exist. My room, number 12, smelled of mildew and cheap pine air freshener, the kind that stung your nose but never masked the damp. The bed sagged in the middle, the curtains were stained, and the window rattled with every gust of coastal wind. It was 2 May, October 17, 2025, and I sat on the edge of the mattress, my soaked duffel bag dripping onto the carpet. My phone was off, I couldn't face the notifications. The inevitable posts from Mira's Instagram, captioned with some cryptic quote about family loyalty or cutting out toxicity. I knew her game. She'd spin this to make herself the hero, the martyr, the carver who saved the foundation from me. I unzipped my bag. The sound loud in the quiet room. My clothes were damp. My laptop wrapped in a plastic bag to keep it dry. At the bottom, I pulled out the torn photo of Grandma Marion, her face half lit by the motel's flickering lamp. She'd been my anchor growing up, the one who saw me when my parents didn't. "Lena," she'd say, her voice rough from years of smoking. "You've got a light in you. Don't let them dim it." I traced her face with my finger, the paper soft from years of handling. She'd died when I was 16, leaving a hole no one else could fill. Mira had taken her pearls, Declan her old watch, but I'd kept her stories, her belief in me. Now, even that felt stolen. I hadn't eaten since the fundraiser, my stomach a tight knot. But it wasn't hunger that gnawed at me. It was something deeper, a dull ache low in my belly. I'd missed my period. The thought hit like a wave, cold and relentless. I tried to dismiss its stress. I told myself, the last month had been a blur of grant deadlines, lab work, and family tension. But the ache persisted, a quiet insistence I couldn't ignore. I grabbed my purse and walked across the street to the 24-hour gas station, the rain still falling in a steady drizzle. The clerk, a bored teenager, didn't look up as I bought a pregnancy test, my hands shaking as I handed over the cash. Back in the room, the bathroom light was harsh, yellow, unforgiving. I followed the instructions, my breath shallow, and waited. The seconds stretched, each one heavier than the last. Then, 2 lines. Positive. I stared at the stick, my reflection in the cracked mirror. A ghost's wide eyes, pale skin. A woman unmoored. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat on the edge of the tub, the test in my hand, and whispered, "You're not alone." The words were for the life inside me, but they anchored me. We're not alone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the small table by the window, the neon vacancy sign buzzing outside, casting red light across the room. My mind churned, replaying the fundraiser, the accusations, my parents' silence, Mira's voice, so sure, so cruel, Declan's smirk, his fake outrage, my mother's refusal to meet my eyes. I'd grown up in their shadow, Mira, the golden child, always center stage, Declan, the charming rogue, forgiven every misstep. I was the quiet one, the one who got good grades, who worked weekends at the Marine Lab, who never asked for attention. I thought that was enough. I thought they'd see me eventually. I was wrong. The next morning, I forced myself to eat a stale granola bar from my bag, washed down with tap water that tasted of rust. I turned on my phone, bracing for the flood of notifications. There they were, Mira's Instagram post, a photo of her and Declan at the fundraiser, captioned, "Family first. Always." Comments poured in. "You're so strong. Mira, the foundation is lucky to have you." I scrolled past, my throat tight, and opened my email. One message stood out, from Caleb Monroe. Subject, I'm here. Caleb was complicated. We'd met a year ago at a marine biology conference in Seattle, bonding over bad coffee and a shared hatred of academic bureaucracy. He was tall, with hazel eyes and a quiet intensity. A former tech investor who'd left his family's empire to study ocean ecosystems. We'd flirted, then drifted into something more late-night texts, long walks on the beach, a kiss under the stars that neither of us had planned. But we hadn't labeled it. I hadn't told him about the pregnancy, or the fundraiser, or the marina. Yet his message was simple. I heard what happened. I'm in Portland. Can I come to you? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. I didn't want pity. I didn't want to be saved. But I was tired. So tired. Of being alone. I typed back, yes, Seaside Motel, room 12. He arrived that afternoon, his old Ford truck pulling into the gravel lot, the rain streaking his windshield. He stepped out, his flannel shirt damp, his hair mussed from the drive. His eyes met mine through the motel window, soft but steady, like he'd already made up his mind to stay. I opened the door, my hands still trembling. You okay? He asked. I shook my head. Not really. He didn't push. He sat in the room's lone chair, the pregnancy test box still on the table, its presence louder than words. He didn't stare, didn't ask, just waited. Want to get some air, he said finally. We walked to the beach, the tide low, the sand littered with kelp and broken shells. The wind was sharp, carrying the salt and sorrow of the Pacific. I told him everything: the fundraiser, Mira's accusations, Declan's lies, my parents' betrayal, the marina, the test. My voice broke, but I kept going, the words spilling out like a flood. He listened, his hands in his pockets, his boots sinking into the wet sand. When I finished, he stopped and looked at me, the waves crashing behind him. I'm not going anywhere, he said, unless you tell me to. I laughed, a brittle sound that caught in my throat. You don't know what you're signing up for, Caleb. Maybe not, he said, his voice low, but I know what I'm not running from. We ended up at a diner on the edge of town, a place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like burnt dreams. We sat by the window, the rain streaking the glass, and ordered burgers we barely touched. He told me about his family, a tech dynasty in Seattle, all glass towers and colder expectations. He'd walked away after they tried to force him into a marriage for strategic alliances, choosing a life of research over their wealth. I saw you present at that conference, he said, his eyes on his coffee. Your work on coral symbiosis. That was yours, not Declan's. No matter what he claimed. I stared at my plate, my throat tight. Declan had taken credit for my research at that conference, strutting across the stage while I sat in the back row, my name buried in the acknowledgments. No one had noticed the theft, except Caleb. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. I didn't know you then, he said. But I do now. We sat in silence after that, the diner's jukebox playing an old Springsteen song. For the first time in days, I felt something like hope, fragile but real. I looked at Caleb, his hands wrapped around his mug, and thought, maybe I'm not as alone as I thought. Caleb's apartment was a small, weathered place on the edge of Astoria, its walls peeling, its couch smelling faintly of the dog that had lived there before us. The view was its only luxury, a cracked window overlooking the harbor, where fishing boats bobbed under a sky that never quite cleared. It was November 2025, and I'd been here a week, my duffel bag still half unpacked in the corner. The motel had been a limbo. This was a beginning, fragile but real. I woke each morning to the cry of gulls and the weight of my growing belly, a quiet reminder that I wasn't just living for myself anymore. I'd started calling the baby Tide, a name that felt like a promise of movement, of change, of something unstoppable. The apartment was sparse but warm, with a thrift store table, a coffee maker that grumbled louder than it brewed, and a shelf of books Caleb had collected, marine biology texts mixed with dog-eared sci-fi novels. He didn't hover, didn't try to fix me. He just made sure there was food in the fridge and a blanket on the couch where I slept. I hadn't moved into his bed, not yet. The space between us was undefined, a mix of trust and caution. But it was enough for now. One rainy afternoon, I sat cross-legged on the couch, sorting through my bag. My laptop was open, its screen filled with job listings I wasn't ready to apply for. I needed work, money, a plan. But the weight of the pregnancy test still lingered, reshaping every decision. I pulled out a book from the bottom of the bag, a field guide to Pacific marine life. Its cover worn from years of use. Grandma Marion had given it to me when I was 12. Her handwriting scrawled on the title page. For Lena, who sees the ocean's secrets. Tucked inside was a yellowed envelope. Her familiar script, faint but clear. For Lena, when you're ready. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter and a notarized document. The letter read, Lena, my dearest, the family will try to bury you, but you're stronger than their lies. I've left you the bluff property, 5 acres overlooking the ocean. It's yours. No matter what they say, use it to build something they can't touch. Love, Grandma. The document was a deed, dated 2015, transferring the bluff property to me. My heart pounded. The bluff was a stretch of land above Cannon Beach, wild and untouched, worth millions in Astoria's booming real estate market. My family had always claimed it was tied up in the Carver Foundation's trust, a vague asset no one could touch. I'd believed them. I'd trusted them. But this deed, with its crisp notary seal, told a different story. They'd lied. They'd hidden my inheritance, erased it as easily as they'd erased me. I showed the letter to Caleb that evening, the rain drumming against the window. He read it slowly, his jaw tightening. This changes everything, he said. They didn't just kick you out, they stole from you. I nodded, my throat tight. Mira always said the bluff was for future projects. I thought she meant the foundation, but it was mine all along. Caleb leaned back, his eyes distant. My family did something similar, he said. They locked my trust fund behind a contract, marry the right girl, work the right job, or lose it all. I walked away. You don't have to. His words lit something in me, a spark I hadn't felt since the fundraiser. I spent the next week at the Clatsop County Records Office, a squat building that smelled of dust and old paper. The clerk, a woman named Doris with gray braids and a kind smile, helped me dig through files. The deed was valid, she confirmed. But there was a complication. Mira had filed a claim on the land 6 months ago, citing foundation interests. A hearing was scheduled for next month. I left the office with a stack of photocopies and a fire in my chest. The bluff wasn't just land, it was a future. A place where I could build something real. I started sketching plans in a notebook I'd bought for $1 at a thrift store. Not just a home, but a research center, Bluff Tide Labs. A place where scientists like me could study the ocean without corporate strings or family lies. I wrote my name on every page. Lena Carver, founder. It felt like a declaration, a line in the sand. But the betrayal still haunted me. At night, when Caleb was asleep, I'd lie on the couch, my hands resting on my belly, and think about my family. Mira's cruelty wasn't new, she'd always been the star. The one who got the solo in choir, the prom crown, the family's pride. When I was 14, she'd spread a rumor that I'd cheated on a science fair project, knowing it would crush me. My parents believed her then. 2. Declan was different. Slyer. His charm a weapon. He'd borrowed my research notes in college, claiming he just needed inspiration, then presented them as his own at a symposium. My parents framed his award. I'd stayed silent, thinking family meant swallowing the hurt. I was done swallowing. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, my laptop pinged with a new email. It was from Harper Quinn, a name I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "The Carver Foundation's Secrets." The message was blunt. "I'm an investigative journalist. I've been following your family's foundation for years. I know about the bluff. I know about you. Want to talk?" I stared at the screen, my pulse racing. Harper's name was vaguely familiar. I'd seen her byline in articles about local corruption, the kind that made powerful people sweat. Part of me wanted to delete the email, to keep my pain private. But another part, the part that had whispered, "We're not alone in that motel bathroom," knew I couldn't fight this alone. I typed back, "Let's meet. Tomorrow. Astoria Coffee House. 10. That night, I dreamed of the bluff, the ocean stretching endless below, the wind carrying my name. I woke with my hand on my belly, tide's presence a quiet strength. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for her, for the future I'd build on that land. And for the first time since the fundraiser, I felt something like power. The Clatsop County Courthouse was a low brick building, its windows streaked with rain, its lobby smelling of polished wood and stale coffee. It was December 2025, and I stood outside, my coat pulled tight against the wind, my belly round under my sweater. The hearing for the Bluff property was today, and I'd spent weeks preparing photocopies, emails, late-night calls with my lawyer, Renee Patel. She was a force, a woman in her 50s with a calm fury and a reputation for dismantling bullies. "We've got this," she'd said last night, her voice steady over the phone. I wanted to believe her. But as I stepped inside, the weight of the moment pressed against me. The courtroom was small, its benches filled with a mix of reporters, locals, and a few foundation donors who'd come to gawk. Caleb sat in the second row, his flannel shirt a quiet rebellion against the suits around him. He gave me a nod, his eyes steady, and I felt a flicker of strength. Harper Quinn was there, too, her recorder on her lap, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She'd become an ally, a bulldog with a nose for truth, and her folder of evidence bank records, emails, forged signatures had given us an edge. Mira sat across the room, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun, her cream-sheath dress pristine, as if she'd stepped out of a magazine. Declan was beside her, his jaw tight, his usual smirk gone. My parents were behind them, my mother's face pale, my father's hands folded tightly. They hadn't looked at me since I'd walked in, and I didn't expect them to. The betrayal was a wound I'd stopped trying to bandage. Renee stood, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Your Honor, we're here to affirm Lena Carver's rightful ownership of the Bluff property, as outlined in Marion Carver's 2015 deed. We also present evidence of fraudulent claims by Mira Carver and Declan Holt, who attempted to transfer the land to the Carver Foundation without legal authority." The judge, a stern man with a gray mustache, nodded. "Proceed." Renee laid out the case with precision. The deed, Grandma Marion's letter, a timeline of Mira's claim. She submitted Harper's evidence, bank records showing Mira siphoning foundation funds, emails where Declan forged my signature on grant applications, a recorded call where Mira bragged about handling Lena to a donor. The room grew quiet, the air thick with unease. Mira's lawyer, a slick man with a practiced smile, tried to pivot. "This is a family misunderstanding," he said. Lena abandoned her responsibilities to the foundation. The land was claimed in good faith. I stood, my hands steady despite the knot in my chest. "I'd like to submit additional evidence," I said, my voice clear. I walked to the bench, pulling a USB drive from my purse. "Audio files, Your Honor. Recorded outside my old bedroom during a family dinner last year. I didn't know they were being captured, but they were." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And what do these recordings contain?" "Ms. Carver, my sister, my cousin, and my mother," I said, discussing how to cut me out because I was too stubborn to control. "They planned to discredit me long before the fundraiser." The clerk played the files. Mira's voice filled the room, cold and calculated. "Lena's too focused on her little science projects. If we don't act, she'll ruin the foundation's image." Declan's laugh, sharp and mean. "Just say she's stealing. No one will question it." My mother's voice, softer but no less damning. "She's always been difficult. It's for the best." The silence that followed was deafening. Mira's face crumpled, her composure cracking. Declan stared at the floor, his hands clenched. My parents didn't move, their faces blank. The judge leaned forward. "This is damning," he said. He ruled in my favor, granting me full ownership of the bluff and barring Mira and Declan from any claim. The gavel fell, and the room exhaled. As we filed out, reporters surged toward me, their microphones a wall of noise. Harper's article went live that afternoon. The Carver Foundation's House of Lies. It detailed the fraud, the theft, the lies, with my story at its center. By evening, it had gone viral, shared across X, picked up by national outlets. My inbox filled with messages, support from old colleagues, offers from investors, even an apology from Mrs. Hargrove, my high school teacher. But one message stopped me cold. From my father. "You've ruined us. Mira's lost everything. Come home." No apology. No regret. Just a demand. As if I owed them salvation. I deleted it, my hands steady, and blocked his number. That night, over takeout pizza in Caleb's apartment, he shifted beside me, his face tense. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. I set down my slice, my stomach twisting. "My mother knows your Aunt Clara. They went to college together. Still talk. She told me about the fundraiser before I reached out to you." I stared at him, the room suddenly too small. "You knew, and you didn't tell me." "I didn't want to lose you," he said, his voice raw. "I should have said something. I'm sorry. It was a stupid answer, honest but infuriating." I stood, my hands shaking. No lies. Caleb. No secrets. If I'm building something new, it's clean. He didn't argue. He pulled out his phone and deleted every contact tied to his mother's world, his fingers moving deliberately. I watched, my anger softening but not gone. "Don't do it again," I said, sitting back down. He nodded, and we ate in silence, the rain tapping the window, a quiet promise to move forward. The next morning, I woke to a new email. Initial funding. Bluff Tide Labs. A $50 dozen grant from a marine conservation group, inspired by Harper's article. I printed the check, walked to the harbor, and let the wind slap my cheeks awake. Mira's face was on a billboard nearby, smiling for some charity gala, but it didn't sting. I folded the check and whispered, "You can't erase what I'm building." The bluff was wild and alive, its grasses bending under the June 2026 wind, the Pacific roaring below like a heartbeat. I stood at the edge, my boots sinking into the soil, my jacket flapping around my swollen belly. Bluff Tide Labs was no longer a dream sketched in a thrift store notebook. It was real. A modular building sat on the land, its glass walls reflecting the ocean, funded by a $50,000 grant and a second round of $200,000 from investors who'd read Harper's article. Inside, two researchers worked on coral restoration tech, their laptops humming, my patents pending on the wall. My name was on every document. Lena Carver, founder. It wasn't just a title, it was a truth I'd carved from the wreckage. I was 8 months pregnant, my twins Mara and Finn kicking against my ribs, their presence a constant reminder of what I was building. Caleb had stayed, not as a savior but as a partner, his quiet strength, a foundation I hadn't expected. He'd sold his stake in his family's tech company to invest in mine, a move that had cost him their approval but earned mine. We'd moved into a small house near the bluff, its walls painted with colors we'd chosen together, its rooms filled with the chaos of preparing for 2 babies. The twins arrived on a stormy April night, born early in a hospital room lit by lightning. Mara came first, her cry sharp and fierce, followed by Finn, quieter but no less determined. I held them, their tiny bodies warm against mine. Caleb's hand on my shoulder. "You're my tide," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. They were small, fragile, but they were mine. And I'd fight for them in ways I hadn't fought for myself. A year later, I stood backstage at the Global Ocean Conservation Summit in San Francisco, my heart steady despite the crowd beyond the curtain. The irony wasn't lost on me. The Carver Foundation had once sponsored this event, their logo plastered on every banner. Now, their booth was gone, their name a footnote in scandal. I wore a tailored blazer, my hair loose, my slides polished to perfection. Mara and Finn were with Caleb in the audience, their laughter a distant hum. I stepped to the podium, the spotlight warm, and began. "My name is Lena Carver, and I'm here to talk about saving our oceans." My voice was clear, my data sharper than ever hormonal triggers in coral symbiosis. Low-cost tech for rural coastal clinics, a model that could scale globally. I ended with a photo of the bluff, Mara and Finn playing in the grass, and a single line, "Built by Lena Carver." Because the truth always rises. The applause was deafening, a wave that carried me off the stage. Reporters approached, their questions a blur. But one woman stopped me, her face familiar but lined with age. Aunt Clara, my mother's sister, stood there, her eyes soft. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said, handing me a small velvet box. Inside was Marion's pearl necklace, the one Mira had claimed as her own. "I kept it safe for you," Clara said. "She wanted you to have it." I didn't wear it. I tucked it away for Mara, for when she was old enough to know her great-grandmother's strength. I thanked Clara, my voice thick, and walked away, the weight of the necklace grounding me. That evening, back in Astoria, Caleb and I sat on the bluff, the twins asleep in their stroller. The stars were out, the ocean a dark mirror below. The lab's lights glowed in the distance, a beacon of what I'd built. Caleb reached for my hand, his fingers resting lightly over mine. "Are you okay now?" he asked. I looked at the land, the house, the life we'd made, Mara's tiny shoes by the lab door, Finn's blanket draped over the stroller, the patents on the wall, the grants in my inbox, the future stretching endless before us. "I'm not just okay," I said, my voice steady. "I'm whole." The tide rolled in, steady and sure, carrying away the last echoes of my family's lies. They'd tried to erase me, but I'd written my name in stone, in soil, in the lives of my children. Bluff Tide Labs wasn't just a company, it was a legacy, one they couldn't bury. No matter how loud they'd screamed,